Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm thrilled to welcome Bryan Sudfield to the podcast today to talk about The King of Marvin Gardens, directed by Bob Rafelson and starring Bruce Dern, Jack Nicholson, and Ellen Burstyn, released, of course, 50 years ago. This one came out in October of 1972. How are we doing, Bryan?
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to talk about this movie with you.
Thanks so much for being here. As I said to you before we started recording, my very first episode of Film at 52 years ago was on Five Easy Pieces, starring Nicholson, directed by Bob Rafelson. One of the most popular, famous films, I would say, of 1970. That is actually my favorite film of 1970. And I believe you just watched that one, right?
I did.
Alongside
I
King of
did.
Marvin Gardens.
I
Have you
did.
seen Five Easy
Yes,
Pieces
sir.
before?
I have not. This was my first time watching that film.
So what did you think of Five Easy Pieces? I would love to just kind of begin there.
Oh my God. It was incredible. It was so good.
Yeah.
I had heard about this film for quite some time. I remember when I first got into the Criterion collection like 6, 7 years ago, everyone
Mm-hmm.
was talking about this Lost and Found BBS set.
Yes.
And everyone kept talking specifically about this film called Five Easy Pieces with Jack Nicholson. And I'm like, I like Jack Nicholson. I'll give it a watch. Fast forward 6, 7 years later, now I finally watched it. And, the sequence where he's at the diner talking about his order and everything, and he's like, what do you mean you don't have side orders for toast? That kind of hit me. If I didn't get a side order of toast with my omelet, I would be very angry as well.
Yeah.
But no, I thought it was a great film. It was very quiet, very intense when it had to be. I
Mm-hmm.
thought Nicholson's performance was unbelievable. Definitely one of the best of his entire career, and one that
Yeah.
really should get more recognition. And we'll probably talk about with this film too, of how
Yeah.
this one should also get more discussion when talking about his work.
Yeah. Five Easy Pieces was the movie that really put Nicholson on the map. He had a small breakthrough the year before in Easy Rider. In that supporting role, he got his first Oscar nomination. And I believe he wasn't even the first choice for Easy Rider. I think he replaced an actor and then only has a few scenes in that movie and just blew everyone away. And then Five Easy Pieces is the one that really catapulted him because he was acting in movies, I believe, starting in 1959 and went a decade of just not finding much success. Like, he appeared in films here and there, but probably most famously in the early part of his career in Little Shop of Horrors, the old black and white version. He's in that. He plays the role that Bill Murray plays in the 80s movie. But yeah, Five Easy Pieces is the one that put him on the map. And then 1971, we get Carnal Knowledge by Mike Nichols, which is a great movie. Have you heard of that one, Carnal Knowledge?
I have not seen that one. It's been on my list for quite some time. I love
Yeah.
Mike Nichols. I can't believe I haven't seen it.
Yeah, Mike Nichols is such a fantastic director. There's so many of his films I need to get to as well. Day of the Dolphin next year, which is like this George C. Scott movie that in the Mark Harris biography about Mike Nichols, it's like a fascinating chapter. I was like, this movie sounds terrible, and I can't wait to watch it. And then he's also he also did The Fortune in 1975 with Jack Nicholson. I have not seen that one either. I looked him up on IMDb yesterday and I was like, wow, Jack Nicholson is in 4 films in 75, the year that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out and he won the Oscar. I was like, oh, that's probably the only movie he was in that year. And he's in 4. I was like, oh my gosh. What are the other 2? He's in Tommy and he's in The Passenger. So that'll be a fun year to dig into his career too. But then after Carnal Knowledge, he has a brief role, I think, just as for a friend. He's in a movie called A Safe Place, and he directed this kind of strange, interesting movie called Drive, He Said. Both of those films are in your BBS set.
Yes,
I had
yes,
that
they
set
are.
a few years ago. Yep. And I watched those. And then his last kind of quiet film, I would say, is The King of Marvin Gardens, which we're going to talk about today. As I told you before we recorded, I feel like this is like the last film he made before he was a star. Because after this, we get The Last Detail, Oscar nomination, Chinatown, huge hit, Oscar nomination. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he wins. And by Cuckoo's Nest, he's one of the big stars of the 70s. So this is kind of like the last little quiet chapter of his career, which I'm really excited to talk to you about. Before we get to the movie, Bryan, I'd love to just ask you, since you haven't been on the podcast before, like what role has film played in your life, and like how did you get started loving movies, and if you have a few favorites all time, I would love for you to share them with us.
So when I was a kid, my parents would take me and my sister all the time to the movies growing up. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, granted, when we were younger, we would watch a lot of family-oriented movies, and I feel like at the time when I was a kid, in the early to mid 2000s,
Yeah.
the PG rated movies were appealing for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and they took risks that most PG movies don't take now, which is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah.
But when I reached my teenage years, I started watching a lot more classics. I started expanding my horizons as a film viewer, and I can't say what the film was that made me go, wow, I love movies. I can't tell you that on the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
But what I could say is that film has meant the world to me pretty much my whole life. I mean, I went to school for filmmaking.
Okay.
I have a degree in film. I don't use it right now because the it's
What
when
school
you're
was
in
that?
your
I
mid
did the
when
same.
I went to Montclair State here in Jersey, which is
Oh,
very
okay.
funny because this
Mm-hmm.
movie is actually set in New Jersey, so
Right.
it's very, very fitting.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I've loved film my whole life, and it's my favorite thing to talk about with people. And I have a podcast of my own where I gush about film called Film Fragments.
Oh, cool.
And I don't, I don't know why I love film so much. It just helps me escape
Yeah.
from what's going on in the world. Even if
Mm-hmm.
you're watching something incredibly depressing, incredibly horrifying,
Yeah.
it's just cool to see these artists bring their stories to life, even if it ends up being a massive pile of poop. Like it's just great to watch these artists tell their stories and bring them to life.
Yeah.
And some of my all-time favorite films, Catching If You Can from Steven Spielberg,
Oh,
criminally
yeah.
underrated, criminally
Yeah, that one's
underrated. No
not
one talks about
really
it.
talk when you talk about Spielberg's work. You don't hear that title very often, right?
Which is sad because it's him, DiCaprio, and Tom Hanks. It's like a perfect trifecta of
Yeah.
talent, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody talks about it, which is really disappointing. Another one of my all-time favorite films, and it's funny because when you did a video regarding the Oscars that this film was nominated for, I kept just talking about Sideways nonstop.
Oh,
Like
yeah, yeah.
that is, in my opinion, one of the best films ever. It's become one of my all-time favorites. It catapulted its way into the top 10, and now it's in the top 5.
Yes.
It's one of the best films ever. Back to the Future, of course, that was one I watched
Mm-hmm.
religiously growing up. Goodfellas, of course. I mean, that's an ongoing
Oh my gosh.
favorite of
Yeah.
all time from people. And I guess one of your favorite films of all time is also one of my favorite films of all time, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate
Oh,
Factory.
okay. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. That one's great.
Those are,
That
it's
that
so good.
movie, yeah, I feel like I appreciate it even more as an adult than I did as a kid. Like, I mean,
Same,
kids' movies aren't that
same.
way. Like, you love
Right.
a movie
I
at
mean,
age
how
7.
often, how often can you, yeah, how often can you appreciate a movie that you watched a lot as a kid more as an adult? Like
Yeah.
usually it's the other way around.
Yo, apparently the director made the movie for adults, not kids, and I think that's why the movie endures for older people, because it's
Uh,
such a great ride, and I don't think of it really as a kids movie. Like, it doesn't,
I
like,
don't
it's so
either.
much more than that, you know. And but it's like that perfect, and it's rated G, so I mean anyone can watch it, and it's like that perfect movie that a lot of kids see at a young age. That's like, oh, there's something a little twisted here. Like, it's not quite like every other Disney movie I'm watching, which I love about that. I love that you mentioned,
Exactly.
yeah, I love that you mentioned Sideways. That's a movie that I saw it when it came out. I was in college. I really loved it. Put it on my top 10 list. Didn't really think about it for many years. And then it's like every 5 years, I find myself drawn back to it, want to watch it again. And I love movies about writers, and that it's about like wine country and these fascinating relationships. And it's just such a unique film that you don't really see anymore. And it's like that perfect time. I feel like '04 was the perfect moment for that movie. And Paul Giamatti's performance is so good,
Oh
so
my god.
devastating. And I could probably make a video just about like why the hell didn't he get nominated for this movie, because he's so great. It
It's
was such a competitive.
criminal that he didn't get nominated.
It was such a competitive year. '04. I mean,
It
it is every
was.
year, but I think like there were
But that
probably
year
5
for
more
best
actors.
actor, oh my god,
Yeah,
that was an insane year.
like For me, the only one that doesn't really make sense to me because it was so competitive is Johnny Depp for Finding Neverland. That one, I'm like, yeah, he's good in that, but like, is he better than Paul Giamatti in Sideways? Come
No, he's not better than Paul.
on.
I would have taken out. I personally would have taken out Clint for Million
Oh,
Dollar
right. That's the
Baby,
one everyone
and,
says
and
Clint
re-
Eastwood.
eh, yeah. I would have taken Clint out and replaced him with Paul. I would have. That's how I would have done it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with that, although I've seen most of Clint Eastwood's movies, and I think by far, outside of maybe Unforgiven, which is also great in, I do think, I mean, in terms of his acting, it's not usually talked about that much in terms of the quality of him as a performer. I do think, especially in the last third, he has some really moving moments in Million Dollar Baby. When he
He
breaks
is
down crying in
really
that
good. And
church, like I remember
oh my
that scene
god.
very vividly. So I'm not mad about the Eastwood inclusion, but I would have loved Jim Carrey to get in for Eternal Sunshine. Kate Winslet got
Oh my
in.
god.
So it's just like that year, I'm like, could we have had 10 nominees? But it is what it is.
Seriously.
Yeah. But yeah, we can go down a rabbit hole of Oscar talk because that's what I that's what I'm into and what I make videos about. But today we're talking about a movie called The King of Marvin Gardens, which kind of shocking to me. I don't know about you. Did not get any major nominations, did not get any Oscar nominations. And the fact that Five Easy Pieces got into picture, best actor, did very well 2 years before. Well, I definitely want to talk to you about, as we get into the performances and things, like what we think maybe this movie should have gotten in somewhere, at least for an acting nomination or two, because I think it deserved it. But
Mhm.
so King of Marvin Gardens, this is a film about a daydreamer who convinces his radio personality brother to help fund one of his get rich quick schemes, but luck is against them both. The game ends very badly. And so this is really like I feel like especially when it comes to the end, it's really a movie about the relationship between two brothers and how kind of fraught it is and how it seems like they've been outside of each other's lives for many years. It's like they only come back together when one wants something from the other. And in this movie, we get a really spectacular cast. We not only get Jack Nicholson and Bruce Dern, we also get the great Ellen Burstyn in a really fantastic role for her. So like this film, it's like hard to define it. Would you say like it's a drama, but
I
it's like
I
got
would
some
say it's a
humor?
drama. I
Yeah,
would say it's a drama.
yeah.
It's hard to like classify what else it really is, but yeah, I mean, I guess when you just talk to someone about this movie and they ask, "Oh, what's this movie? Like, what genre is it?" I would just say drama because I don't know if would want to tell them anything else because
Mm,
I'll tell you that not knowing anything about the movie other than who was in it and where it was set,
yeah,
I didn't expect everything to go down the way it did. I was
yeah.
like, "Wait a minute, what is this I'm watching?"
It's kind of a tricky movie to define in terms of like its story, and it is kind of in the same way Five Easy Pieces is. It's kind of meandering at times, and you're not quite sure where it's going. That for me is the excitement of especially of films from the 70s because directors weren't forced to put their movies into a box and okay, we have to hit the end of act one here and then we move into act two. Okay, introduce the villain. It's
Right.
like this movie just exists on its own planet. I'm just like, what?
Yes.
It just kind of goes from scene to scene. You don't really know what's happening, and then characters pop in and out. And like at the end, we get lots of scenes without Bruce Dern, and we're really just with Jack. And it's just like an interesting little oddity of a movie. Like I don't think this is a great film, but it's like it keeps your interest. Like it's kind of unique. Like there's nothing else like it in some ways.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wasn't OMG about this movie like I was with five with five
Yes.
easy pieces. I was so wowed by five easy pieces. And then watching this, like I really liked it. I thought it was very well made and
Hmm.
beautifully acted. But it's not one that I could see myself going back to. Like five easy pieces, I could see myself definitely going back to
Yeah.
within the next couple of years. But this is probably just a one-time watch for me. But I was
Yeah.
very impressed with it, nonetheless.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that when I watched it again yesterday. I was like, okay, so why do I love Five Easy Pieces so much? And this movie, was my second watch, I'd seen it once a few years ago when I had that BBS collection. I since lent it to a friend who moved, and I never got it back. That's another story.
Oh no.
A film friend of mine in college really wanted to see a couple of the movies in the collection. So I had watched them all, and I'd watched the set I just had on my shelf. I'm like, so I let him borrow that and 2 other movies. Then he moved away like a year later, and I forgot. And I went, oh my God, I forgot. I didn't get that set back. So I need to get it again because I love that set.
Yeah, you gotta get that back. That's a
I'm
great
like,
set.
I'm like,
That's
what
like
was
a
that? What was that? Like,
collector's
was that like
set.
$80? Or what was that I paid for that?
Yeah, probably about $80 or $90.
It wasn't even, it was like, I feel like it was like a year after he had moved away when I went, oh my God. Yeah, I think I wanted to watch, oh, I know what it was. I wanted to watch Last Picture Show for the podcast, and I
Oh.
didn't have the set. And I was like, oh, that's right. I lent it out to that guy and go, oops. But it happens. I'll get it back. I'll have him mail it. I'll write him. But yeah, so before we get into like the like some more of our thoughts about the movie, I wanted to share some trivia here I had, and getting back into like why is this movie not working on the level of Five Easy Pieces was, and kind of want to dig into that more too. It's kind of interesting to me that Bob Rafelson, he takes a lot of story credits on his movies, but he doesn't usually take a screenplay credit. He took one for Five Easy Pieces, got an Oscar nomination, and then for this, he has a story credit, but the screenplay credit is Jason Brackman, at someone who, if you look him up on IMDb, has one other feature film credit for a 1980 film called Times Square, and that's it. So I don't know what happened there. So maybe he didn't have a great experience with King of Marvin Gardens. Bob Rafelson's credits go a little bit deeper. This was his 3rd film as a director. His first film is Head, which is the first film in that BBS set, which you have to be in the right mindset to watch Head, because that is nothing like King of Marvin Gardens or Five Easy Pieces. Head is much more, how do I put it? I feel like you need to be on some kind of substance to really enjoy that one. I mean, it's got like animation, and it's got like all sorts of crazy stuff going on. And it's a episodic, almost like a sketch film. It's not like it's like a narrative from beginning to end. It's kind of a series of sketches and weird animation moments, and it's nothing like his later work. So that's kind of an interesting kind of thing to look at for his career. But as you said about New Jersey, this film was shot almost entirely in Atlantic City in the winter months of 1972, which made the film of considerable historical significance as a visual record of the last days of the city's classic era resort architecture. Many of the hotels we see in the movie were demolished in the next few years to make way for a new generation of casino hotels. I love that about film too, that you can capture a moment in time when you have a lot of exterior scenes that even a year or two later, like all that's gone. I love that film can capture that too. It's like a little time stamp on where we were. It's really cool.
I agree. And when I was watching this, I'm like, man, if only Atlantic City was like this now. Atlantic City is kind of a dump right now. It doesn't compare to how
It
it was in
doesn't
this
look
movie.
when they're out on that beach and you see all that kind of like old school architecture, like you get a
Oh,
different feel, a different sense.
It's so breathtaking to watch. And then you go to Atlantic City now, 50 years later, and it looks like a dump. I mean, granted, there are some nice parts of the boardwalk, of course. There are some gorgeous hotels, of course. But if we're being realistic, it doesn't look the same as it does now, because in the movie, when you're away from the boardwalk and you're in the city of Atlantic City, the suburbs of Atlantic City, it's so much nicer in this movie than it is now. Now
Yeah.
it just looks like a dump, which is really sad.
So everything is gone from when they shot this, like all those exteriors. I'm sure most of it
A lot of
at least looks
a lot of
different.
those buildings, yeah, a lot of those buildings are pretty much gone.
Mm-hmm.
One of the hotels, I believe, got turned into one of the casinos. I'm not sure which one. I have to look. Oh,
Okay.
Bally's Atlantic City. That place is kind of, it's okay. It's fine for what it is, but it just doesn't look like as nice now as it did 50 years ago.
Yeah. Do you know what the original title of the movie was before they went with the title that's in the movie?
I do not.
The Philosopher King. Which sounds
Oh,
like either like a Monty Python movie or
it does.
like like a fantasy kind of fiction film. Like it does not sound like what the movie is. King of
No.
Marvin Gardens is still like a kind of an odd title in that it doesn't I feel like represent what the movie is. Like it kind of
Yeah.
it sounds like a different movie than what you get, but it's better than the Philosopher King.
Oh yeah, the Philosopher King sounds like some
King,
magic type of
yeah,
movie. Now I know that like he's a dreamer in the movie and he
yeah,
has these goals and ambitions, but like that doesn't fit with what the movie is going for, whatever whatsoever.
yeah. So they went with the King of Marvin Gardens, which apparently, so I was watching this yesterday. I was like, what's the title mean? So it's a reference to the original version of the Monopoly board game in which the main properties were named after locations in Atlantic City. Like that's kind of where the
Yes.
title comes from. So I'm like, why are they not playing Monopoly at some point in the movie? Couldn't you see like Ellen Burstyn having one of her emotional fits? Like, get back to the board game. you know,
Get out,
but
jail card. I hate this.
yeah, can you like I can see that. I could see a deleted scene where she's like pounding on the desk, like, get over here. We're trying to finish this board game. No, she cuts her hair, like, God damn it.
Every time I lose my money, a piece of my hair goes.
That should have been a later scene of the like after, so she cuts off some of the hair, and then when she's losing Monopoly, she's just full on shaving it, just like shaving it off. It wouldn't. I mean, I feel like. I mean, when it got to the last 30 minutes, I'm like, anything can happen in this movie. I don't know what's. I don't know what is off limits here, especially with the Burstyn characters, as we'll get into. So I have a few more pieces of trivia about the actors and things, but we can kind of talk about them as we talk about their performances. So yeah, so we opened with kind of our general thoughts on the movie. We're both what in like the 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10 range. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's solid. But yeah, so you just watched Five Easy Pieces too, and I was kind of trying to put my thoughts together there. What is it about Five Easy Pieces that works better, do you think?
I just think the story is more compelling in Five Easy
Yeah.
Pieces than the
Mm-hmm.
story here. Like, don't get me wrong, the story here is quite interesting, especially when you look at films about broken brotherhoods that are starting to kind of reconnect again, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
for the wrong reasons. But for some reason, I think the writing was just a lot smoother and better in Five Easy Pieces. And also, I thought the characters were more engrossing
Right.
in that film than this one. I don't know what it was. Like, I just finished watching this movie about an hour and a half ago,
Yeah.
and I don't know, it just really didn't click as well with
Mm-hmm.
me as Five Easy Pieces does.
Yeah, I feel like Five Easy Pieces does a really good job of getting you close to the Nicholson character. It's really about his journey all the way through. And there are other characters. I love the Karen Black girlfriend character. She just pops off the screen. It's just fascinating. I can't remember.
Incredible.
I think she was the one I wanted to win the Oscar for supporting actress that year. So I think she won the Golden Globe, but she lost the Oscar to Helen Hayes from Airport, which I'm like, yeah, not your best choice, Academy. But so yeah, there's something about the through line of that narrative is very clear. Even though we hop around a bit, he's like at work at the beginning, he's playing on the piano in the freeway on the freeway, whatever, and then he like goes to his family's home in a different place, and but I mean, even though that movie's slow, doesn't have a whole lot of story. Like there's something about his journey that's really compelling all the way through, and he has this
Yeah,
sense
you're
of
just
like,
really fascinated with the character there more
yeah,
so than the character here. The character here, it's not as compelling as the character of what was his name? Bobby in
yeah,
Five Easy
yeah.
Pieces,
So
right? That was his name?
Nicholson in that film also has these moments of rage, right? I remember when he gets in that car and he's just like
Yes.
pounding on the steering
Mm-hmm.
wheel, and then the classic scene in the
Mm-hmm.
diner where he takes his rage out on the waitress. And so you're also just waiting for him to blow up again. You're like waiting, is okay, is this going to be another moment where
But he
and
but but he's restrained the whole movie. Like he's very quiet and very laid back the entire time. Like there isn't
yeah.
really any of those moments of rage and outbursts throughout the movie, because even when you think it's coming, he's just so calm. His delivery of everything is just so calm and mellow and relaxed compared to Five Easy Pieces, where he's goes
Yeah.
on these full blown rage tantrums and everything.
I feel like Five Easy Pieces as a story is a little more focused, whereas King of Marvin
Yes.
Gardens, it feels like there's like 3 hours of story here, and it's just kind of compressed into 100 minutes. And like we open with this long scene of Nicholson's character at his radio show. And I think the opening shot is what, 3-4 minutes, maybe longer, of just him just sitting there talking.
So it's almost 6 minutes
Oh,
long.
6 minutes.
It,
And I'm like, that's an unusual way to start a film. And even in 1972, when it's very much the director's medium and there's not a lot of pushback, I'm like, is this the best way to open the film? I don't know. Like,
I
did
thought
you
it
did you
was a
like
great
that?
open. I honestly thought it was a great open. I thought it was
Yeah.
a great opening. I thought it
Oh,
was a great monologue, and I
uh-huh.
like how it didn't cut away. And then I kind of thought that might have been the best scene of the movie. But also, what I
Okay.
liked about that was that it was then bookended at the end of the movie, where it was kind of similar, where it was this long take. I mean, the camera wasn't as
Hmm.
close on his face as it was in the opening, but I
Yeah.
kind of liked how it mirrored from the
Hmm.
beginning to the end. I thought that was really great.
Hmm. I liked how it bookended, but it like the obvious choice would have been to have the last shot of the movie of him on the radio again. I like that we get a
I
one more
agree.
little moment of him going home, and we see the old footage of him as a child with his brother. I thought that was like
Yeah.
I thought the end, like the last scene was great. I think this movie is comprised of 5 or 6 scenes that are great, but it's just
Yeah.
there's something that's just not cohesive. There's something
Yeah.
not
There's
holding it
something
together.
missing. There's something missing there.
There's not like the passion, or like, as you use the word compelling, it's not as just the story, the characters aren't as compelling as they are in Five Easy Pieces. There's not like a
Yeah.
freshness and an alive element. I don't know, there's just something a little bit restrained.
Yeah.
And there's some scenes that are kind of meandering, and you're like, what does this have to do with anything? Like, where are we
Yeah,
going here?
exactly.
And that a little of that's great, but when it's like,
Hmm.
sometimes if it's like 20-25 minutes of that, and I'm like, like,
Yeah, like
what's happening here?
enough is enough already.
Yeah. But the performances are good. I really like this. So I don't know if you read about this, but so when they were rehearsing the movie, Bruce
Hmm.
Dern and Jack Nicholson had the other role. Did you know that?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
did read about that.
And it was during rehearsing that they just thought, let's try it the other way. And everyone, including the actors, including Rafelson, they like the other way better. And what is, I think, of interest in this movie is that it's a very rare kind of reserved performance for Jack Nicholson. Usually he's the big one. Think
Hmm.
Batman, think most of his big, but in this one, he's got the glasses on, he's a little shy, he doesn't really have any outbursts at all, and he's just kind of quiet. And so that's like a unique performance in his long career. You don't see that very much.
No, not at all. And that's what surprised me the most about this movie, was that I was really expecting him to have at least one outburst in the movie, and he
Yeah.
didn't. And he didn't. And I'm like, what is this?
Hmm.
Where's my Jack Nicholson outburst? You couldn't give me at least one, Bob? Like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, even when she's shooting his brother at the end, he's still just like not
I
moving.
know. He's just like, okay.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah. But so this is what Ellen Burstyn said about the change. She said the actors liked the change because they were both parts they weren't usually cast in, especially Jack to be cast as such an introvert. That's not the
Hmm.
usual Jack Nicholson role. So that must have been fun for him. I mean, I don't know like who was the first one to suggest the change, but I wonder if Nicholson was like, maybe, I've done a few of these roles, like maybe we switch. I feel like that might have been a Nicholson idea, because watching the film again yesterday, I'm like, I guess I could kind of see it switched, but I think they made the right call. Like Dern feels right for that brother, the other guy.
I think so too, because like I haven't seen a lot of movies with Bruce Dern early in his career, but I think for someone like Jack, like it made sense and it
Yeah.
was perfect for him to tackle a role that was very different for him. And obviously at the time he hadn't done a lot of leading roles,
Right.
but he probably didn't want to be typecast as like the psychotic, rage-inducing character. And yes, throughout most of his career, he did play that character, and he
Hmm.
knocked it out of the park, of course.
Hmm.
But it was nice and refreshing to see him play someone very, like you said, very introverted, very quiet, very restrained. It shocked me, but I was like, I wish that we got more roles where he took this approach instead of just playing the usual rage-inducing
Right.
character that he's been known for pretty much his whole career.
Well, yeah, well, that's what I'm going to talk about talk about the end. My double feature idea is a film with Nicholson that I think he does play a more reserved character, which we'll talk about. But most of his roles, he's kind of known for being big and loud and outbursts, and I think a lot of that comes from Five Easy Pieces, Last Detail, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think those three films kind of set him up for that kind of character. I do think he has. I mean, it's been a few years since I've seen it, but Chinatown from 74. I think he's
Yeah,
not as big in that one. I think he kind of plays that one more reserved. So it's kind
right.
of up and down in his career, but I really liked him in this. And, even his physical look, it's different. Like you don't really,
It
it feels
is.
like the kind of role that could have gone to a different actor if Nicholson had turned it down. So I kind of like that with his relationship with Rafelson, he came on board this one.
Yeah, I thought the look for him was really it was just great. And some actors can't rock the fake glasses look. He crushed it. He crushed it.
Yeah.
Young Jack Nicholson is a very handsome guy, and with the glasses, I mean, it's on a whole other level. It's on a whole other level.
Oh yeah, no, I've always had a big crush on Jack Nicholson, always have. And it's like one of his most like handsome performances. Like I like the guy he plays here. I'm like, yep, sign me up. We're good.
Yep.
Like, he's not crazy, he's just more like his, a little bit nerdy. And you don't see Nicholson play that very much. So that I like that. Like, yeah, Five Easy Pieces, King of Marvin Gardens era Nicholson is like it's like good to go.
Massive thumbs up.
I saw him in I want to say it was like a Roger Corman horror film from the 60s where he played like the cute romantic lead guy, the hero of the movie. This is like 63, 64, and he is like batshit gorgeous. In like
I have to look this
64.
up. I
What
have to look this
what
up.
movie was it? It was like a Roger Corman horror film. It was like on a different box set. Oh, I know what it was. It was on Scream Factory. It was on a Vincent Price box set I got, and it was just like I think it was like called The Terror or something. It was from
Yeah, I think that's
So if
it.
you look up Nicholson on IMDb, go to like 63,
Oh my
64.
god, he is gorgeous.
What
He's
was it?
gorgeous
Is it called?
in
What's it
this.
called?
The Terror.
The
The
Terror
Terror, right?
with Vincent Price, and
Yes.
it's
Yes.
63 somewhere on there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's Nicholson about a decade before King of Marvin Gardens. He was born in 37, I want to say. And
Yes.
so he's like
Yes.
25 in The Terror. And he plays like the cute, like hero of the movie that, bears no resemblance to the Nicholson we know of the 70s and 80s. And he's just like the handsome lead of the movie. And I remember I put it on. I'm like, oh, let's watch this one. Vincent Price. This will be fun. It was like an October movie I just put on randomly one night, and I was like, oh my god, it's Jack Nicholson. So that's cool. Like if you're a Nicholson fan, it is worth your time going back to some of those early films he did in the 60s before he really became the actor we know him to be. Are you a fan of The Shining?
It's my favorite horror film of all time.
So did you react to any moments in King of Marvin Gardens in a thrilling way?
Well,
Do you know what
besides
I'm
the
referring to?
not quite. What do you refer? Oh.
Chapman Crothers from The Shining is in King of
I
Marvin
was like,
Gardens.
wait a minute. Why do I know this man? Oh my god. It's
So
him.
that was
It's
so
O'Halloran.
as I said, I'd watched this once before a few years ago when I watched it again last night. I had forgotten that Scatman Crothers is in this movie and has a couple scenes with Nicholson. And The Shining is probably my top 20 of all time. Like that is just a very special movie. It's my favorite Nicholson film, even over like Five Easy Pieces and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm a huge horror nut. The Shining to me is like more than a movie. It's like on another level of just perfection. I love that film.
Yeah,
So that
absolutely, absolutely.
completely took me out of King of Marvin Gardens when we had a scene between Jack and Scatman Crothers. I was like, The Shining. I love their
It's The Shining before The Shining.
and it's like, this is before, so I'm like, oh my gosh, on that set of The Shining, Jack was like, hey, and they knew each other, which is cool. What did I read? They're all okay. This blew my mind too, because I've seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest a couple times. Apparently, Scatman Crothers is also in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and he's in the Fortune. So I guess they were in 4 films together. So in 75, we'll have some more reunions between the two. So The Shining was the 4th time they made a film together. That's really cool.
God.
I love Scatman Crothers. Like, I love his look, his voice, his presence. Like, I wanted him to be in more of King of Marvin Gardens. He comes in and it's like you're rock and rolling with this guy. I could have had him be a much larger character.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. But so I don't know. I love that when there are films that we love that we just watch over and over and over, and then you see like 2 of those actors in a different film, especially one you're watching for the first time. That's always like a cool, like, oh, sometimes you don't expect it. So I like that about this movie too. Let's see what else. Al Pacino was offered a role in the movie, but turned it down. The role of David. I don't think Al Pacino would have been the right person for this. He apparently turned it down to instead make The Godfather. I think he made the right choice. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's not even a question.
Yeah.
That's not even a question.
Yeah. So let's talk about Bruce Dern. What do you think of Bruce Dern in the film?
I thought he was pretty good in the film. I had never really watched anything with him.
Okay. Have you seen any of his films? Okay.
I've seen Nebraska, of course. I've seen a few of his films from like the 2000s. I can't really name them on top of my head. Maybe I haven't seen as many Bruce Dern films as I thought, but he's in
some Tarantino films too.
Yeah, I've seen all the collaborations he's done with Tarantino, but in terms of like non-Tarantino films, I mean, this is one of the few that I've seen, and I liked him in this. I thought the banter between the 2 of them worked really well, and I think that if it hadn't worked as well as it did, it would have been a major flaw to the movie, and it would have really left a massive tear on it. So I think if they didn't have good chemistry together, then this movie probably would not have worked as well as it did.
Yeah.
For me, at least.
Yeah, and I bought them as brothers. That felt believable to me. They're around the same age, and I agree. They have good chemistry, and I'm not a huge Bruce Dern fan, if I am to be honest. Like, I love him in Nebraska, of course, but I've seen him in some of these 70s films we've talked about in the podcast, and he's always good, but there's something about him that never like pulls me in the way that Nicholson does. Like, there's just something that always keeps me at a distance, and I don't know. I'm always like, is this him? Is this the character? Because I feel like I've seen 3 or 4 for the podcast since I started it 2 years ago, and he's always good, but there's just something, I don't know. There's something about him. I like him in Coming Home, where he got an Oscar nomination. That's the 1978 Vietnam film with Jane Fonda and Jon Voight.
Yeah.
He's really good in that. So I think it's more the characters than it is him as a personality, as an actor. But I like this is a great example of a movie. I was always way more pulled into the Nicholson performance and his scenes more so than the Dern stuff. I don't know.
Yes, 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah. But in terms of Oscar nominations, I am shocked that if this movie had gotten 1, I think the Ellen Burstyn performance is phenomenal. I think it is fantastic. I think she makes the movie so much better than if she had not been in it. Like, her role and her performance is just so like unpredictable, and it's almost like, you know, it has some resemblance to a little bit of like Karen Black and in Five Easy Pieces, that kind of just like that girlfriend character who's just a little bit off. And it just gets more and more like crazy.
A smidge.
Yeah, especially regarding the end, which we'll talk about too. We give away spoilers there. But I just was like, so I think I've watched all but one of the films that got a supporting actress Oscar nomination. And I think what Ellen Burstyn does in this movie is better than anything else I've watched. And I want to say 2 of the 5 nominees for 72 Best Supporting Actress, it was the only nomination for the movie. And I feel like this would have been a great opportunity to give the movie something in the history of the Oscars, give it that one. I think it should have gone to Burstyn, because she is like another level in this. Every scene she's in, I was on board and really riveted, and just watching her more than I was watching the men.
100%. She was hands down my favorite thing about the film. Like, she knocked it out of the park. I've kind of been on an Ellen Burstyn kick lately.
Yeah.
I just watched Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore for the first time, which I thought was great.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Requiem for a Dream for the first time, which I also thought was great. And then she knocked it out of the park. And, you know, when you first meet her, I mean, she's just so lovely and vibrant, and she's breathtakingly gorgeous. And then the movie progresses, and then you see her true colors.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, when you talk about the sequence on the beach where she's burying her makeup, and then she just starts snipping her hair, it's like, girl, what are you doing?
So yeah, I think Ellen Burstyn should have been nominated, although it's hard to really get upset about it because she was nominated the year before for The Last Picture Show. She's nominated the year after for The Exorcist, and then she wins the next year for Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. So it's not like I'm weeping over the lost Ellen Burstyn Oscar nomination for King of Marvin Gardens, but she is just on another level in this, and I'm kind of surprised with its fall release, with Nicholson, with Rafelson, with all the love that Five Easy Pieces got. It kind of surprises me that she didn't get in. The category is not stacked with a bunch of like, oh, well, clearly they got in. I mean, in supporting actress for this year, Susan Tyrrell in Fat City is a film we talked about on the podcast in July. Tyrrell is solid in the movie, has one scene towards the end that's really great, but it's not a performance that of like, it's like, oh, of course, that had to get in. And then the other one, let's see, Shelley Winters for the Poseidon Adventure gets in. That's like an action thriller disaster movie. I have not actually seen that film yet. I've seen like clips of it. We're going to talk about that one in December. But I feel like there was room here. And considering they nominated her the year before for The Last Picture Show, when they ended up awarding Cloris Leachman the Oscar for the same film, like they didn't have to nominate her the year before. It seems like a nomination that should have happened, especially given that King of Marvin Gardens didn't get it for anything. Like that would have been the one to nominate it for. So I wonder what happened there. Maybe it just didn't land for most people, and it just wasn't quite at the level of Five Easy Pieces, and it just kind of fell through the cracks. I think that's what happened, but we'll never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. Any other performances we want to talk about? So Burstyn, she's like a former beauty pageant contestant, right? And then there's this fourth character, Jessica, played by Julia Ann Robinson. I read up on her. Like, I was like, has she been in much? Like, she died in a fire in 1975, 3 years after this film's release. So this is like, I think, her one and only major film role, which is very sad because she had a great presence too, and I would have liked to have seen her do more. But I was like, that's tragic.
Oh, that's so sad. She was so good in this.
Yeah, she's gorgeous. Man. Yeah, and does a good job in the role.
So sad. Oh,
she died in an apartment fire in Eugene, Oregon in 1975. That's crazy.
That sucks. That's terrible.
But I wanted to mention her too because she's really good in the film. Let's see. The reviews were mixed at the time. Shocker. Roger Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars. He called it original, individual, and often frustrating. He says it takes a lot of chances and wins on about 60% of them. Gene Siskel gave it 3 stars. He said it contains 3 of the best performances of the year. Roger Greenspan of the New York Times panned the film, calling it filled with cliches, a low-key and very empty film that exploits rather than explores its themes of failed dreams. I love that sentence. I don't know if I agree with it, but I like the sentence. I'm like, man, I gotta up my movie criticism game. I gotta write better. I have to write better sentences because I'm just like, it was good.
It was fine.
Yeah. Those movie reviews, I write film reviews for in-session film, and sometimes I put in some criticism when I write pieces for Gold Derby, trying to like elevate my language. I got to get better at that. But yeah, I mean that makes sense to me. And then I couldn't find it. I didn't see it nominated for anything, like not like a film festival prize, Golden Globe, something. Like I couldn't find anything. So I wonder if like part of it was just maybe the release was kind of botched. Like maybe it didn't get a very good release. Maybe it didn't have a lot of marketing behind it. Maybe they didn't believe in it. Maybe it was just a busy fall season and it got kind of lost. I mean, it happens today, right? Especially movies that come out. This came out in like early October.
It happens all the time. It happens all the time. It happens every single year. There's that one film that you think could be like a big potential awards contender, and then it's just swept under the rug because of how it's marketed or when it comes out, like, or just the amount of momentum behind it from the studio or the filmmakers or the cast. Like, it really just depends. It happens all the time, though.
Yeah, there's always one or two that if you would ask me in June, like, do you think this would be a contender? I'd say, oh, absolutely. And then it opens in late September, early October, plays a couple weeks, maybe gets good reviews, but not great. And then by November, no one's talking about it. That happens. I feel like most people in the first half of 72 would have said that this would be a big Oscar contender. And then it probably disappointed a lot of people expecting another 5 Easy Pieces. Nicholson, Rafelson, they probably expected it to be a different kind of movie. They didn't get it. It's a little meandering. It's got a lot of characters. Doesn't have as much focus. So it probably there was some positive, but Roger Ebert at this time is giving lots of kind of like smaller films 4 stars out of 4. I think he gave it like the safe, kind 3-star rating because he recognizes, like we do, that there's good stuff in the movie. It just doesn't all come together. It's not super cohesive. And so I feel like there's like 60-70% of a great movie here, but it just doesn't quite connect the dots in a way that it should. I feel like there was a chance here for Rafelson to make a masterpiece. There is the makings of it. This doesn't quite all come together. So I feel like it probably started at the screenplay stage. Like if the screenplay had been worked on maybe another 6 months, if they had like tightened it a bit, maybe explored the Nicholson character more, if it wasn't so involved in a lot of the story mechanics, especially in the last third, and really focused on that brother relationship. Like I think there could have been something much better here, but as of now, it's just okay. It's good.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the exact same way as you.
Yeah. So yeah, as we kind of wrap up our thoughts in the movie, I ask this of every guest, like, so we've given our thoughts on the film. If someone were to take this story and make it in 2022, like how would it be different? How would it be similar? How do you think we would contend with this material in a movie today?
Yeah, I'm still struggling to really figure that out because I don't know what would change about it, what would be like removed or added, or I really don't know. That's a really good question to ask, but in my head I'm like, what would be different if they made this movie now in 2022 as opposed to when they made it 50 years ago? Like it's tough. It's really tough to say, Brian.
Yeah, it's hard, but I ask it because a lot of films are remade decades later, like they're shooting a new Exorcist right now, and
Oh,
it's coming out in 2023, the
oh,
50th anniversary of the original. And so it
terrible idea.
happens, I would say every 8 to 10 films we talk about has been remade at some point. Like a lot of them
Yeah,
do, or at least have had a sequel or something.
right.
I don't think anyone's going to touch this one.
I
But
don't think so.
my take on it was, if someone were to remake this movie now, I'd want to see a film, same kind of story, but from the perspective of the Ellen Burstyn character. She is our main character. She is our through line. Because we have to, before we wrap it up, we have to talk about the last scene where she shoots and kills the Bruce Dern character. Did that just, I mean, I had seen this movie before and I forgot
Hmm.
that moment. It's so out of nowhere. Like, what did you make
It
of that scene?
Well, when that scene was coming up, and I was just like, "Oh, here we go, another argument, blah blah blah." Oh my god, like, "Oh, Jason, you suck. Oh my
Yeah.
god, Jason, you're so bad. Oh my god, Jason." And it's like, "I'm gonna kill you, Jason." I'm like, "You're not gonna do anything,
Yeah.
girl."
It's just talk.
And then she shot him 4 times, and I'm like, "Oh." Like my jaw dropped. I was like,
It's
like it
shocking.
just completely dropped. It shocked me.
She's
I was
like, I
like,
mean,
"Oh, this is what we're doing now?"
for like what, at least 2 minutes, she's just like, she's holding the gun and saying, I'm gonna shoot you, I'm gonna shoot myself, I'm gonna shoot him. And she's just like, but she's like holding the gun like she has no intention of using it.
Yeah, and Jessica comes out of the shower, and
Yeah.
David's like, "Oh, she's contemplating shooting everyone. The only candidate is not you."
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'm like, is it the editing or something? I mean, it is shocking. Like, it's like just
It
this
really
long
is.
conversation. And I think, doesn't she like scream? And then we cut to like a close up of her, fairly like a medium shot, and she just starts going. She just starts pulling that trigger.
She shoots once, and you think that's it. Then she just shoots 3 more times, and then boom, it's done.
She
And
shoots
then she
him
walks to the
once.
shower, and yeah, and then she walks to the shower, and then she has like a hard time shutting it off. And I'm like, "Okay, is she gonna kill herself right here?" And then
Yeah.
she doesn't, and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Well, she doesn't. She shoots him once and it hits him in the shoulder, right? And it kind of like brings him
Yes.
down. And then she
Yep.
pulls the trigger and nothing happens for about 5 seconds, right? She's just pulling it. And then he's like turning
And
towards
then
her.
more comes out.
And then she hits him 3 more times.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we think of Bruce Dern's dead face?
I laughed. I thought it was funny.
he like the fourth hit, he just goes down and he's like, I'm like, I don't think it'd be that quick, right? Even if you got shot in the heart.
No.
It
No.
wouldn't be
And listen, I'm not a medical expert
yeah.
or anything, but like, I don't think that's how it would go.
It's just, it's okay that I can go with it, but it's like there's something about it's just like his dead eye, like I don't know. I mean, when they go check on him, but then it's weird how you think Rafelson would have given us a close-up of Nicholson at some point,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't. Like, he like, doesn't he like cover Julia or Jennifer, Jessica? I keep messing up her name. Jessica. Doesn't he like kind of like cuddle with her in the corner, like keeping her safe?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
And
You don't get a
you don't
close up
see
on
them.
You don't get a close up on Jack until you get that scene where the coffin is being loaded onto the
Right.
train. That's the only time you get a close up. But even still, he just looks very like, "Oh, okay, my brother died. Okay, whatever." Like,
I was thinking about that. I'm like, why would Rafelson not give us a close-up of Nicholson in that moment? Like, why would
yeah,
we hide that? That was very strange.
yeah. Yeah, you would think for a moment where some woman just killed your brother right in front of you that you would
Yeah.
get some kind of reaction shot. But the fact that we didn't, I was like, "Oh, what's going on in your head, Bob? Like, what's going on?"
Yeah, and then they walk over to the body, they inspect it. It's kind of from the back of Nicholson, and then we
It's from the
follow
back. That's right.
Burston into the bathroom, and then we cut
Mm-hmm.
to a wide of Jack in front of the coffin being put on that train. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like it's shot in a way like, oh, we were all expecting that to happen, like that was inevitable. And of
Yeah.
course, okay, now he's in the coffin, but it's not. It comes out of nowhere. So I don't know. It's
Yeah.
like it's an odd scene. clearly one of the most memorable in the movie because it's like where the most happens in the whole film.
That's exactly.
But again, just another scene. I mean, I think it's flawed, but I think Burstyn in that scene too is just on another level. It's so great. So
she just knocked it
I'm
out of the park.
excited to see more of her work in the 70s because she's just such an exciting actress, still working today. She is in the new Exorcist movie. She is
Okay,
90
now,
years old.
oh my god. Well,
She's
now
in
I'm
the one.
intrigued. Now I'm intrigued.
I like, is it going to be a Jamie Lee Curtis? It's the same director as Halloween 2018, Halloween
Oh,
Kills,
so then
Halloween
it's
Ends.
probably going to be that same format where it's like a continuation or something. And
David
like, I don't
Gordon
know. I guess
Green.
that's what's going to be. Is
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't know. It's not a remake. It's like a
Oh,
continuation.
okay.
Burstyn is playing the same character from the 73 film.
How are they going to make that
She's
work?
90
I don't.
now.
Oh my god. I don't know how they're going to make that work.
So
I'm curious.
I want to see her in full on like Laurie Strode killer mode. Like I'm taking
Oh,
demon down.
100%. Listen, if she could do that, I will be there immediately. If I hear that that's what happens, I will be there day one.
Like the demon is resurrected in physical form and she kicks down the door and has a shotgun and 90-year-old Ellen Burstyn just goes and just blows it away. I will jump out of my seat and cheer. You have that promise from me now. Yeah, you mess with the wrong mama. I don't know. But Linda Blair is not in it, so I don't know. I mean, that would have been really interesting if we were exploring like the mother-daughter relationship between them 50 years later. That would be interesting. But as far as I know, Blair is not in it, so I don't know. So we'll see what comes of that. But yeah, so I think if they made it today, I'd love to see it from the Ellen Burstyn's character perspective. But I don't know. It's just like this oddity in 70s film history. The follow-up to Five Easy Pieces, clearly not as good. I don't know if Rafelson could ever make another movie just quite as great as Five Easy Pieces. I feel like that was kind of like the peak of his creative powers and working with Nicholson. There's two films that I haven't seen where he collaborated with Nicholson. The Postman Always Rings Twice with Jessica Lange from 81, I think the year that came out. And then I think that's supposed to be pretty good. And then I think the other one is not great. And that's Man Trouble from 1992 with who was the female lead in that, but it's Nicholson again. And that movie got kind of tanked. It didn't do very well. So yeah, Five Easy Pieces. That's the one, of course, to see. And but we'll talk about a couple more here at the end. Before we get to our final segment, I'd love to do the Divine Double Feature. What would you pair with the King of Marvin Gardens?
Okay, so I was thinking
modern
about
film.
I was thinking about films
Yeah.
to where there's a brotherhood that kind of comes back into fruition. It comes back to play, even if it's for the worst things. So it took me a while to think about it, but I'm like, you know what? This is a situation where one brother calls another brother, and then they do things that aren't going to be great, not only for them, but for people involved. I picked, and this is just a weird pick, but this is what I thought of, from 2007, Cindy Lumet's Before the Devil Knows You're Dead.
Ooh, I love that movie. Okay, so why'd you pick that one?
So this movie kind of has the similar thing of one brother calling another brother to kind of help him out in some like terrible scheme. You know, Philip Seymour Hoffman calls Ethan Hawke and says, "We're gonna do these kinds of terrible things. We're gonna rob this store, and that's it." And then obviously more terrible things happen. Not gonna spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it's a truly phenomenal film. And the last film that Sidney Lumet directed before he passed. But yeah, that's what I thought of the entire time I was watching this. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, Nutter, and then they get involved in these terrible schemes and badness ensues. Obviously what happens here isn't as bad as what happens in that movie, but I think it just pairs really well as an interesting double feature.
That was a great film. That was on my top 10 of 07. And I feel like, has there ever been a better bookend for a director to, speaking of film at 50, over the course of 50 years, 1957's 12 Angry Men and 2007's Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. 50 years of films, many of them great. Network is one of my all-time favorite films. But to start your career with the masterpiece that is 12 Angry Men, one of my favorite black and white movies ever made. And I
One
think
of the best
still
films
holds
ever
up.
made.
Yeah, and just like I mean, you can show that movie to like younger people today who don't like black and white, and they are hooked, like they love it. And then to end his career with a very like just fresh and alive thriller like Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, which does not feel like the work of a man who's retiring. It feels like the work of
No,
like a 25-year-old young director.
it
So
absolutely.
that's really cool. And so yeah, that's a great pairing with this. I'm a huge Philip Seymour Hoffman fan. I feel like as of now, I feel like every performance he gave us is a treasure, good or bad or whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, most of them are great. And that's one of my favorites of his. That was a great year for him because he's in Charlie Wilson's War. He gets the Oscar nomination for that. But the two that
Yes.
I love him in are Before the Devil Knows You're Dead and The Savages with Laura Linney is
Yes,
another
I love
great
that movie.
movie
Great
and performance.
movie.
So that was like, I mean, that's like coming right after his Oscar win for Capote. And then he's in all these great movies. He's right after that, he's in Doubt with Amy Adams, Meryl Streep, and just like, oh my gosh, that's
Mm-hmm.
such a great period of films for Hoffman. And so
Yeah.
I feel like Before the Devil is one that doesn't get talked enough about. Like that's a great movie. Great final film for any director, especially Lumet. So I was thinking of the reserved Nicholson performance. I was like what would be a neat double feature with a more modern Nicholson film where he's reserved? And so I thought of one of my favorites from '02, and that's About Schmitz. Have you seen About
Oh,
Schmitz?
yes.
Also the director
Yes.
of Sideways, Alexander Payne.
I love listen, that was the period where Alexander Payne pumped out like banner after
Yeah.
banner, election About Schmidt, Sideways, The Descendants, Nebraska. Like, I mean, oh my God. Talk about a perfect five right there. Like,
Oh yeah. He is just he's always interested in character over plot and
yes.
just kind of following the character. He's about casting the right people. Like George Clooney really wanted the Thomas Hayden Church part in Sideways, like really wanted it. And he was like, "You're gonna be distracting. It has to be someone that not everyone knows." And he was right. But they made up. They made The Descendants later, so it worked out. But About Schmidt, I think, works in part because we get a huge star who has a lot of baggage, who we've seen 30, 40 years of their films, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a different side of Nicholson and About Schmidt. It's much more reserved. He doesn't have a lot, I mean, maybe a couple, like very few outbursts in that movie. And it's really like, really about getting older, dealing with grief. His wife dies. What am I going to do now? I'm retired. My daughter's marrying this horrible guy, and I guess I have to go to their wedding. And it's funny, and it's tragic, and it's dramatic, and it's like, if not my favorite, one of my top 3 favorite Jack Nicholson performances. I mean, he's the whole movie, and it's
Yeah.
just great. He would be great in other films after that, especially The Departed. But for me, like the last great Nicholson performance, especially for a lead role, is in About Schmidt. That was like his last
Absolutely.
Oscar nomination, and I guess he's every few months I'm like maybe he'll come back, but I think it's been 12 years since How Do We Know, that
Yeah.
movie with Witherspoon. I think he's retired. There was talk of him doing a movie in 2017 with Kristen Wiig, a remake
Yeah,
of a foreign film.
Tony
Tony
Erdman.
Erdman, yeah. And I want to say for a year that was like in development. They were
Mm-hmm.
working on it, and then that just didn't happen. Because I'm like, can't we get one more? Can we get one
Yeah,
more?
one more. One more.
It's we talk about that all the time. This idea of like when you're just phenomenal talent, decades of great work, when the last movie is not great, it's like, ugh, you just want that last one. It's like, oh well, if that was going to be the last one, then he should have stopped after The Departed. Like that should have been it. But
100%.
he dies at the end of The Departed. It's a great death scene. That would have been the perfect send off. But
Absolutely.
that's not how it works all the time. But so that takes us to our final segment. Bob Rafelson, the director of The King of Marvin Gardens and Five Easy Pieces, sadly passed away in July of this year, 2022. And so I thought we would dedicate the ending of our episode to him. So I have seen 3 of his other movies. You said you just seen the main 2, right? You saw King and Five Easy
Just the
Pieces.
main 2.
So
Yep.
I do think Head has its moments from 1968. That's a fun one. It's not like a great movie, and it doesn't really hold together as a singular narrative. It's kind of episodic all over the place, but it's like an interesting first film, and it's kind of fun to watch. It's in your BBS set, so check it out. The other 2 I've seen, I really like Stay Hungry from 1976. It's kind of a sports drama, a little bit different from these 2 movies. I believe it was the next film he made after King of Marvin Gardens. And it's notable for featuring the first like real like performance of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like he did that Hercules movie where he just plays like the beefcake eye candy kind of like horribly dubbed movie he's in. But like the first like significant performance of his is in Stay Hungry. It's Jeff Bridges, Sally Field, great cast. That's a good movie. And then the other one he made, I think he made one more movie after this, but his last like significant film, one that's worth watching, is the last film he made with Jack Nicholson. It came out in early 1997. It's called Blood and Wine. And I think it also make like an interesting double feature pairing because it's also about like family relationships and like committing crimes and wrongdoing. Could also be an interesting double feature with King because it's 25 years later, 1972 to 1997. It's their last collaboration together, and I think it's like his last like big hurrah of a movie. It's a great cast. Michael Caine is in it, Judy Davis is in it, and Jennifer Lopez is in it. And it's like this forgotten movie that kind of came and went. And it's the year that Jack Nicholson is in As Good as It Gets and wins his 3rd Academy Award for Best Actor. And for anyone who saw Blood and Wine, he's just as good, if not better, in Blood and Wine. It just wasn't very well promoted. It didn't get a good theatrical release, so kind of came and went. But I would say, like, if you're a Nicholson fan and you want to see like a later career movie that might have slipped past you, check out Blood and Wine. It's really good. But the best movie Rafelson made was Five Easy Pieces. It's my favorite film of 1970.
Yep. I can't add anything else to that, but I agree with you.
Yeah. As I said before, I think my favorite Nicholson film is still The Shining, but Five Easy Pieces is definitely in the top 3. It's one of the, like, if you're interested in early 70s cinema, that's one you have got to watch. And I'm very excited for this podcast. You had a chance to look at it because it's just a brilliant piece of work. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it was just so good. It was just so good.
Yeah, so check it out. If you've never seen Five Easy Pieces, to celebrate the life and career of Bob Rafelson, who we lost in July of this year, definitely do yourself a favor. Watch Five Easy Pieces. That takes us to the end here. Brian, thanks so much for being on Film at 50 today. I'd love to hear anything you would like to promote. And if you want to tell us where we can find you online, now would be the time.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me on here. It was an honor to come on here and talk to you today about this film.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't an incredible film, it felt exciting to talk to you about just film in general.
Yeah,
so
it was
thank you
fun.
so much for having me. So for everyone listening, you guys can follow me on Twitter and Letterboxd at Bryan Sudfield. Very easy peasy to find me. And you guys can find my podcast, Film Fragments, on any podcasting platform. We do an episode every Friday where we bring on a guest to talk about their favorite films from an actor, director, or genre.
Oh,
There
cool.
are some people that Brian has had on this show that may or may not be coming on to the show of mine, so that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Brian himself might be coming on as well. You'll have to see. You'll have to stay tuned for that.
Oh,
but yeah, that's where you guys can follow me online.
That's right. That's right. We've talked about that. A certain someone to talk about on your show.
Yes.
talk about bliss. That would be pure bliss. So I look forward to that. So this was a lot of fun. Thanks for being here, Brian. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check out my YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video. If you're interested in the Oscars, I have a new video every Tuesday talking about Oscar history and lots of other fun stuff when it comes to film history. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.